All right, class, welcome to the Unit 10 mini lectures. So hopefully everybody's doing well and learning a lot about healthcare administration, particularly the financial aspects. So I know we're just basically merely scratching the surface, but still some important information for you to know and really some of the basics. So I think as some of you start to get out there, and some of you will likely be administrators at some point. There is a growing preponderance of nursing administrators out there. So having a great, a basic foundation of financial management will definitely serve you well, especially if you end up taking a department head role or maybe a C-suite role or something of that nature. So again, not an intent to make anyone financial experts here, but just enough information to give you some knowledge about it. So I want to say everybody's doing great. So thank you for the participation in the discussion boards. The discussions are fantastic. So appreciate the ongoing dialogue. And that really helps with these courses. And if you ever have any questions of me, don't hesitate to reach out. That's what I'm here for. So this week, you can have a lot of information. You're going to be talking about budgeting. You'll be learning about budgeting. You'll be learning about financial statements. You're going to talk about integrated delivery systems and ACOs and such. So, I've got, about 5 minutes to kind of cover this stuff. So it's going to be really quick, but read through your textbook, shoot me a note if you need any extra help. And, again, that's what I'm here for. So for the four financial statements, these are the most important ones to know about. The balance sheet, obviously, that's a snapshot in time for an organization, kind of outlines, the wealth and the liabilities of an organization. And it has to match. The assets and the liabilities have to match or balance, such as the term balance sheet provides. Statement of operations, also known as the income statement, that really kind of provides a good overview of revenue and expenses, usually over the course of a year. Statement of changes in net assets, kind of is what it is. It just shows the net assets over time for an organization and how those change. Statement of cash flows. The income statement doesn't really provide a good indication of how cash flows in an organization, but that is the reason for the statement of cash flows. It can give management a pretty good idea of how how the cash is flowing in and out of the organization. You'll talk about different budgets, right? So the statistic budget is where we kind of begin usually. Then we have all these different kinds of budgets down here, all the way through the cash budget to the financial statements. Capital budget is another important one that you may have even heard about. The capital budget is typically usually they're 5 years out, usually, sometimes they're 10, and it outline big capital projects for an organization. So you'll definitely hear about the capital budget in the future. Revenue and expense budget, it's kind of exactly what they reference here. Discretionary revenue budget. Maybe there's discretionary revenue at the end of every year or most years that the organization needs to figure out what to do with. And so that's what the discretionary budget is. So a lot of it is kind of the name. The name indicates the budget. Cash budget is exactly what the cash budget provides. Your book has a great example of a cash budget and shows some pretty good examples of how a healthcare organization A kind of uses their cash budget to make decisions. So and I think that's in chapter 16, I do believe. And then we get to managed care, which is a concept that y'all are probably pretty familiar with. It's managed care obviously is it's changed since the 90s when managed care really came into favor for the United States. The healthcare system, now we've kind of migrated to ACOs, but managed care is still firmly entrenched in our healthcare system. And it really became, I guess, successful, if you will, and really became popular because of this concept of savings, a concept of efficiency, increased quality. There was a failure for fee for service, right? The more volume we do, the more we get paid. And so managed care was this silver bullet to really fix all that. And managed care had some pretty tight controls over the healthcare system. Michael Moore did a movie called, I'm gonna blank on the name here. But it was before Sicko. He did a documentary on HMOs and kind of vilified HMOs for what HMO stood for and what Americans believe that HMO stood for, which was deniers of care. And that, of course, prompted several CEOs of managed care organizations to come on the defensive. One had even said at one point, hey, you don't hear you don't hear about every safe flight that comes in and out of LaGuardia Airport. You're only going to hear about the bad ones. And so there is some truth to that. But literature does question managed care's ability to kind of rein in cost. And we've seen that maybe it didn't do as much as it promised. But why managed care, right? So we got, Richard Nixon here in 1973. His administration was behind the HMO Act of 1973. Rewind even time to the 1900s. Here you got Baylor Hospital, kind of right here. They were really thought to be that the Baylor plan was the impetus for HMOs. Then, of course, we have 4 types of HMOs: HMO, PPO, POS, and EPO. Health Maintenance Organization, Preferred Provider Organization, Point of Service, and Exclusive Provider Organization. All different, but really kind of at the end of the day, the difference between the 4 are, do I want a healthcare plan, if you will, that gives me more freedom, more choice? I'm going to pay a lot more for it. Or do I want, HMOs kind of down on this end, a little bit more restricted on freedom of choice, but I'm going to pay a lot less. But at the end of the day, HMOs were designed to really limit the quantity of care and the amount of reimbursement that was provided to providers. And they gained significant power as they started to enroll more people. And so as HMOs got bigger, the freestanding hospitals became fewer, sole practitioners became fewer, and they began to be replaced by medical systems and physician group practices as part of the HMO structure. Which leads us to integrated delivery systems, right? We talked about this a little bit last week, but it's really considered a vertically integrated health system. You're going to find physicians, hospital services, post-acute services, ambulatory care, really this holistic approach to healthcare services. She and Singh define integrated healthcare systems as a network of healthcare providers and organizations that provides or arranges to provide coordinated continuum of services to a defined population. And they're willing to be held clinically and financially responsible for the clinical outcomes and the health status of that population. So integrated delivery systems were really popular in the 2000s. ACOs are similar, but they're not quite integrated delivery systems. They are groups of doctors and hospitals and other providers that provide coordinated care to a group of Medicare patients. Really look at the Affordable Care Act. I think that the term ACO was coined in about 2006. ACOs became part of our healthcare system after the implementation passage of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. Really focuses on chronically ill patients. That's their focus. It's not their sole focus, but the majority of the focus is on chronically ill patients to ensure that they receive the right care at the right time. And they do share the financial and medical responsibility of patients. But where the IDS and ACOs differ are that ACOs really have a tendency to focus on health information technology and sharing of data to make evidence-based decisions and to make sure that this continuum of care is provided. But there are considerable startup costs to ACOs. It's difficult for providers to change old habits, right, that they've kind of created over the course of years. There are liability risks, right? So we have patients that come into primary clinic A, maybe referred to a specialist, but maybe the HIT, that health information technology, we're not sharing all the information, so we're not able to review all the information. We make clinical decisions that aren't necessarily the right ones because we're not able to review all of the information. Thus, that could lead to some liability risk. And they are designed to increase quality without limiting choices, right? So that's one of the positives for the patients of an ACO, but that can be financially disturbing, if you will, or challenging for the ACO itself to kind of rein in the costs when patients, hey, sometimes patients do what they want to do, and based on ACO rules, if you will, they can have that free choice. But went a little over my 5 minutes. I know it's a lot of information, and maybe you felt I didn't provide much, but if you have questions, reach out to me. Have fun this week learning through the material, and I'll see you all in the classroom. Ciao.